All right, so are you ready to dive into something pretty fascinating?
Always. What do we have today?
Well, today we're going to explore something that seems so familiar, so basic, and yet it goes incredibly deep. Fire.
Oh, wow. Okay. I can already tell this is going to be good.
Yeah, and to guide us on this journey, we have Gaston Bachelard's The Psychoanalysis of Fire.
Interesting. I know a bit about Bachelard, but haven't read that one yet.
Well, get ready for a wild ride. It's
Right.
not about like the chemistry of fire or anything like that. It's more like he's using the idea of psychoanalysis to explore fire.
So we're not talking about like how to build a campfire.
Not exactly, no. More like how fire shapes our thoughts, our dreams, our deepest selves.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, Bachelard goes deep. He looks at fire through dreams, myths, poetry, even early scientific writings, all to uncover how fire really impacts us psychologically.
It makes sense. I mean, fire has this kind of primal hold on us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's what Bachelard gets at. He starts by saying, look, fire has fascinated us since, well, forever. It seems to give us easy answers for everything: life, death, energy, change, big concept.
Right. Fire just seems to explain it all.
But then he kind of pulls the rug out. He says, hey, that simplicity, it's deceptive.
So there's more to it than meets the eye.
Way more. He says fire's psychological impact is much more complex than those simple explanations. It goes much deeper.
Okay, I'm ready to go deeper. Where do we start?
Well, he introduces this idea called the Prometheus complex.
Ah, I've heard of that, but isn't that like the Oedipus complex?
Similar, but not quite. The Oedipus complex is all about family stuff, right?
Yeah, sure.
But the Prometheus complex, that's about our need to understand and control fire, to master it intellectually.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just watching a fire, it's about making it, using it, like bending it to our will.
Exactly. And he has this great example in the book about this chemist named Ducarla, who, even as a kid, was obsessed with fire. Like, he'd come up with all these recipes for making fire, testing out different methods, different materials.
So it wasn't just about fire itself, it was about figuring it out.
Yeah, it was the pursuit of knowledge. This need to master something so powerful makes you think, right? Has fire ever kind of captivated you in that way?
I mean, who hasn't stared into a fire and just felt mesmerized, That feeling of power and maybe even a little danger.
It's primal, isn't it? Like Bachelard's tapping into something deep within us.
Definitely.
And it's not always about raw power either. Bachelard also talks about fire as a source of daydreams, like those moments of reverie.
Oh, yeah. I can see that.
He describes this really vivid scene, like imagine a grandmother. She's cooking soup over a fire, right?
Yeah.
And there's this child just watching, waiting. And the child's totally engrossed in the whole experience.
Right. You can almost smell that soup simmering.
Exactly. It's the sights, the sounds, even the smell of the fire. It becomes this whole sensory world, more than just what's physically there. And that's what Bachelard's saying. That fire lets us step outside the purely objective world. We enter something more subjective, more imaginative.
It's like those memories that fire evokes, those cozy nights by the fireplace, right?
Exactly. Or think about roasting marshmallows as a kid.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Those memories are powerful.
It's like they get imprinted on us somehow, and they shape how we see fire, even as adults.
I think you're right.
And speaking of how we see fire, Bachelard gets into this other really interesting point, the duality of fire, how it's both destructive and life-giving.
That's a good point. I mean, fire can provide warmth, it cooks our food.
Right. But it can also rage out of control,
Oh,
like with wildfires.
exactly, two sides of the same coin.
And to illustrate this, Bachelard brings up this pretty intense myth, the story of Empedocles.
Wait, wasn't he the philosopher who...
Threw himself into Mount Etna.
Yeah, wow, what a way to go.
Right. But Bachelard sees something deeper there. He says it's not just about self-destruction. It's about this intense desire to understand fire completely, to become one with it.
Even if it means, well...
Yeah. Even if it means self-annihilation.
intense.
Right, it's like this push and pull, isn't it? Our fascination with fire, but also this healthy fear of its power.
For sure. It's a force to be reckoned with.
And that duality plays out in how we use fire, how we view it, across cultures, across history.
Right. I mean, think about fire rituals where it's about purification, new beginning.
Exactly. But then there's that other side, the destructive power, the reminder that fire can consume everything.
Absolutely. It's a powerful force no matter how you look at it.
And of course, we can't forget about this other connection that Bachelard brings up, fire and sexuality.
Oh, interesting. How does that fit in?
Well, he references this researcher, Max Miller, who studied early fire-making techniques. And what Miller found was that many of these techniques, they kind of mimicked well.
Mhm.
Yeah. And this led Miller to think there was this deep link between fire, sexuality, and even creation itself.
So it's not just about the heat and intensity of fire.
It's more than that. It's symbolic, right? The
Yeah.
light, the heat, the energy, it all becomes a metaphor.
A metaphor for passion, desire, even procreation.
Exactly. Although Bachelard does caution against oversimplifying things. He says fire's symbolic meaning can be interpreted in lots of ways. It's not always so straightforward.
That makes sense. It's a complex symbol for sure.
But he does acknowledge that link, that connection between fire and sexuality. It's a theme that pops up again and again throughout history and in all these myths. It's hard to ignore.
Definitely. It seems like fire just keeps revealing more and more layers the deeper we go.
It really does. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect that Bachelard explores. The role of fire in alchemy. And again, it's not really about the science of alchemy, like trying to turn lead into gold or whatever. It's more about the symbolism of fire.
It's more like an inner alchemy.
That's it. Bachelard focuses on how alchemists use fire to symbolize transformation, purification. Like fire could burn away impurities and reveal the essence of something. And Bachelard connects this to the idea of psychological transformation, personal growth.
So it's like fire as a metaphor for our own internal journeys.
Exactly. And I think that's something we can all relate to, right? That feeling of wanting to shed old patterns, those parts of ourselves that are holding us back.
For sure. It's like fire can help us refine ourselves, become more authentic.
Precisely. Now, we've talked about fire as this primal force, this source of daydreams, this symbol of transformation, even sexuality. But Bachelard also explores fire's role as a creative force, especially for artists and poets.
Oh, I like that. So how does he connect fire to creativity?
Well, he talks about this poet, Novalis, who was really drawn to imagery of light and warmth in his writing. Novalis believed that just by looking at fire, contemplating it, you could reach a heightened state of awareness, almost like a spiritual awakening.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It is. And it makes me think about all those times when I've been staring into a fire and I feel this surge of energy, this inspiration, like my mind starts racing with ideas.
Oh, I totally get that. It's like fire can spark something within us.
It's more than just visual, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like fire taps into something deeper, something
Mhm.
primal and instinctive. It's connected to that core of our creativity.
I think you're right. It's not just about the flames themselves. It's what those flames represent, what they evoke in us.
And that's what Bachelard is helping us see. That fire is way more than just heat and light. It's this incredible, complex symbol that shapes us in ways we might not even realize.
It's a reminder to pay attention to the world around us, to see the meaning in even the simplest things.
Exactly. And that's just scratching the surface. There's so much more to uncover in the psychoanalysis of fire.
I can't wait to dive deeper.
Well, we'll be back with part 2 of our deep dive soon, so stay tuned. We've got plenty more to explore.
Sounds good. I'm ready for more. So we're back, ready to delve deeper into the psychoanalysis of fire.
And Bachelard doesn't let up, does he? He keeps pushing us to see fire beyond just this physical thing. It's about the symbolism, those deeper layers of meaning.
Right, and that myth we talked about earlier with Empedocles jumping into Mount Etna.
Intense, right?
It's a powerful image, and Bachelard uses it to make a really interesting point. He says it's not just about some guy, tragically destroying himself. There's something more going on. He sees it as this ultimate desire to understand fire, to actually become one with it.
So it's more than just suicide. It's like this ultimate quest for knowledge.
Exactly. This yearning to merge with this force that's so powerful, so mysterious. Bachelard even gives it a name. He calls it the Empedocles complex.
Oh, okay. And what does that mean exactly?
It's this idea that we're drawn to the danger of fire, the beauty of it too. We want to unlock its secrets, even if it means risking our own safety.
So like that moth drawn to the flame.
Exactly. It's like this primal instinct, Have you ever felt that pull, that urge to get just a little too close, mesmerized by those flames?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think we've all been there.
That's the Empedocles complex at work.
Wow, okay. I'm starting to see how all these ideas connect.
And Bachelard also links fire to daydreaming, those times when you just kind of drift off, lost in thought.
Reverie, right? He calls it that.
Yeah. He describes fire as this focal point for our imagination. Like it allows us to escape the everyday world and just enter a space of pure emotion, pure thought.
He says even just watching a fire can bring back all these memories, thoughts, feelings.
Totally. And it's not just the visuals, right? It's the sounds of the crackling, the smell of the burning wood.
Right. It's multisensory, like It engages our minds on this whole other level.
It's like fire helps us move beyond the purely objective world. We get to tap into something deeper, something more personal, more subjective.
Yeah, like that example with the grandmother cooking soup over the fire and the child just soaking it all in.
It's about more than just the soup. It's the anticipation, the warmth, the connection.
And those early experiences with fire, especially when we're kids, I think they stay with us, don't they?
It definitely shape how we relate to fire later in life. Like they become part of our subconscious.
It makes you think about your own memories of fire, right? Those moments of comfort, but also maybe a little bit of fear mixed in.
Totally. And that's what makes it so fascinating, isn't it? Fire is so many things at once.
Well, and Bachelard gets into that too. He talks about how fire making, learning to create and control fire, was a pivotal moment for humans, like in our evolution.
He's not just talking about the practical stuff, like using fire for warmth, for cooking.
Right, it goes beyond that. He's saying it impacted our brains, our thinking, even our consciousness.
Like fire was essential for us becoming who we are today. That's a big claim.
It is. But I love how he brings in all these different perspectives. It's not just about the scientific account of how we learned to make fire. He pulls from mythology, folklore, even poetry.
He analyzes ancient rituals, creation myths. He looks at how different cultures viewed fire, how they used it. It's this really interesting mix of science, philosophy, cultural analysis.
And remember that connection with sexuality we talked about earlier? He dives deeper into that too.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering where he'd go with that.
Well, he brings up that researcher, Max Mueller, again, the one who studied early fire-making techniques. And Mueller believed that a lot of those techniques were symbolic. You know, they mimicked sexual acts. He saw a direct connection there.
Between making fire and...
In procreation, creation itself. And Bachelard seems to agree. He points out how the heat and light of fire, they can be seen as metaphors, right? For passion, desire, even creation.
It's that raw energy, that intensity, you know?
Exactly. But again, he's careful not to oversimplify things. He reminds us that fire's meaning can be interpreted in so many ways, depending on the context.
He's multi-layered.
Exactly. But that link between fire and sexuality keeps popping up across cultures, across time periods. It's a recurring theme. It's something we have to pay attention to.
It seems like everywhere you look, fire is revealing something new about us.
It really is. And then he gets into how fire is used in poetry, in literature. All these different ways that fire imagery is used to express emotions, experiences.
Like love, passion, destruction.
Exactly. And Bachelard points to poets like Novalis, who was fascinated by the way fire transforms things. You know, darkness into light, coldness into warmth. Novalis saw fire as a symbol of transformation, a way to connect with something larger than ourselves, something spiritual.
So fire can be a source of inspiration.
That's what Bachelard's suggesting. That fire can spark our imagination, help us tap into our creative potential.
I like that. It's like fire has this power to unlock something within us.
It's not just literal fire, right? It's about nurturing that inner fire, that spark of creativity.
So it's about how we approach the world, that sense of curiosity, that passion, that willingness to try new things.
That's what keeps the fire burning, so to speak.
I love that analogy.
Now, things take a turn when Bachelard starts discussing alchemy. But again, it's not about the literal practice. It's more about the symbolism that fire plays in alchemical thought.
So it's about inner alchemy, right? Personal transformation.
Exactly. The alchemist saw fire as this pure